The origins of Alden Lane have all the elements for a made-for-TV movie. It has intrigue, suspense, drama, misfortune, good fortune, and true grit. So I'm going to set the stage and take you back. My father planted the first walnut orchard in 1925, the second walnut orchard in 1948, the year of my birth, so do not do the math. And that takes us to then fast forward to the fall of 1954. It was October. My mother and father were taking the walnut crop up to Walnut Creek because Walnut Creek was a mecca for walnuts. There were walnut orchards, there were walnut processing plants, there were walnut distribution places. And so they dropped their walnuts off, came home, and on the way home they stopped for dinner. And a gentleman approached them while they were having dinner and said, I know this young man that's a horticulturist that believes that your corner would make a great nursery. And so it was a very cordial encounter. They shook hands and smiled and really didn't think a thing about it until the very next day. The very next day, there was a knock on the farmhouse next door where I grew up, and it was the young man. The young man was 28 years old. His name was Buck Sharp. He had a plot plan in his hand, and he was very convincing. He was a dynamic, charismatic, sort of type A, driven, ultimate salesman kind of guy. And down the road, he convinced my parents that this was a good thing to do, that they should go into business with him and do a new little nursery. And so Buck's idea was that we would split 60-40. He would take 60 because he had the really good idea. And my mom and dad would get 40 because all they had to do was to provide the land and the water and the capital. But my mom and dad went, you know, that's not going to work. So my dad's friend that he had gone to high school with was Joe Shinoni, who went on to Santa Clara University. He became a lawyer and then a judge here in town. So my dad reached out to Joe to ask him to come up with this partnership agreement, and he did. It was a 50-50 split. So there was always a debate about when we actually opened. I knew it was in May of 1955, but it wasn't until just ahead of our 50th anniversary, Cindy said, you know, we've got to do some research. So I went to the library, went to the microfilm, found the opening ad for the nursery, which is just the most amazing thing. I love it. A dozen flowers for 50 cents. A hose, a 50-foot hose for $3.50. Junipers, a giant juniper for $3.50. Just an amazing thing. May 14th was the opening date of the nursery. So I suspect at the end of May that my parents went to Buck and said, you know, you've gone through our life savings of $7,000. We're going to need some help, you know, making this go forward, because Buck had spent money on inventory, brand new step-side Chevy pickup, rototillers, water rollers, all the things to do lawn installation with. So a lot of money was going out and not a lot of money was coming in because it was a fledgling little business. So Buck said, not to worry. I have this really rich girlfriend in Kansas. He flies to Kansas and proposes, and she says, yes. That's how good this guy was. Amazing. And so he came back, set the wedding. The wedding date was June 26th. But before we get to the wedding, let me tell you what else I found in the microfilm, in the newspapers. I found out that, and I do remember being in the rodeo parade. We had the brand new pickup with the brand new sideboards that had just been painted by Scully Sign Company here in town. I can still remember the fresh paint from those signs as we were driving down the parade route with the plants in the back. And we won third best commercial float, third only to the accordion band of San Leandro and a musical group in Hayward. So when we were approaching our 50th anniversary, I said to Cindy, I said, you know, we have got to win first best float, and we have to enter. And we did. with a lot of help from our friends. Everybody team, Don Brazil, our great neighbor across the street, invented these wonderful racks that we were able to put along the hay wagon to hold flowers that spelled out 50th on the side. It was just great. First best commercial float. We did it for our 50th anniversary, so that was really wonderful. All right, so that was on June 12th. We opened on May 14th. So the wedding was set for June 26th, the Saturday, and I'm guessing they must have closed the nursery because there was nobody else to be here, so they must have closed the nursery. I was a flower girl. I remember holding a whole bunch of white gladiolus in my arms, and the bride was beautiful. Her name was Vita Bergentine from Kansas. And a couple days before the wedding, evidently, unbeknownst to me, because I was 7, the bride figured it out. She went to Buck and said, you know, this isn't going to work, because clearly I know that you like me, but I don't know if you love me, and I think what you really, really want is my money, and this is not going to work. And she says, I've got to go home, I can't do it. He said, no, you don't understand. You know, the flowers have been ordered, the caterer's been called, the invitations are out, everything's in process. She says, no, I can't do it. He's for me. He says, I will make sure it's just a mock ceremony, just go through the motions, and just do this for me, if you would be so kind. And she agreed. That's how good he was. And so the day of the wedding came. There was this lovely ceremony, a lovely reception at the house, at the farmhouse where I grew up, where Buck knocked on the front door to start this whole process. And photographers were there from the newspaper. And the officiant was none other than Joe Shinoni, the judge that helped with the partnership agreement that was my dad's high school friend. And so Vita, the bride, went to Judge Shinoni after the ceremony, or after the reception, and said, this wasn't real, right? And he says, I am so sorry, but you are married. This is the real thing. And she went, what? So she and her maid of honor fly back to Kansas. And then what happens is there has to be an annulment. And so Buck, I think in his mind, just wanted to make sure, you know, it was in the newspaper, he's married, he wants to make sure that, and he may have been using it as a publicity thing for the nursery. I don't know what was going on in his mind. But at that point, he's going, okay, so I don't want to have this annulment happen in Alameda County. So there was a change of venue to Santa Clara. So the proceedings would not happen in Alameda County, so there wouldn't be any reporting in the newspapers about this annulment. Then the next thing I read in the newspaper is that on July 1st, Buck speaks to a garden club, much as I would speak to a garden club, or a team member would speak to a garden club, or my husband at his garden center would speak to a garden club. And in the article, it listed the names of the people that were in attendance, old Livermore families, recognizable names for me. It was really fun. Then the next article was the article that helped me really get an idea of the real ending of the story, the ending or the beginning, I guess, huh? So on Friday, July 9th at 10 o'clock in the morning, Buck's annulment was to happen in Santa Clara courthouse. And so he was there with his attorney, John Whiting, who I'm sure was a friend of Joe Shinoni's. And so Buck was sitting in the back of the courtroom. They were early because his attorney had other people to help there too, and he was in another courtroom. And so in the back of the courtroom, Buck, this now 29-year-old, dynamic, charismatic, type A, driven kind of guy, sitting quietly waiting for his matter to come up, slumps to the floor. The bailiff runs to the next courtroom believing that there is a physician in the next courtroom. The bailiff collapses in the arms of the next courtroom's bailiff. The bailiff and Buck are both dead on arrival at the local hospital. So, deep breath. So I'm sure John Whiting then called my dad's high school friend, the lawyer that did the negotiation with the partnership, officiated at the wedding, to tell him that he better call Jack and Ruth and tell them that their partner is dead. My mom and dad were hard-working people. My dad obviously did a lot of farming. He had a business in town. My mother was a registered nurse and had retired and was home. They sat at the kitchen table kind of debating what they should do. They said to one another, do we walk away from our life savings or do we try to make a go of it? And my mother, in her, she just had this wonderful optimistic spirit. And everything was, that glass was always half full. And she said to my dad, you've got your day job. Grandma's here. My father's mother, my grandmother, Millie. Grandma's house, where my grandmother lived, next door, was here to take care of me. And she's let me make a go of it. Let's try. And so with a hose in one hand and a Western garden book in the other, she taught herself the business. She would water the plant, she would read about the plant. She studied, she knew how to study, she knew how to work. And she became, I think, one of the best plantsmen for her time in this area, just by simply doing that. It was an amazing, amazing beginning. And then after that, I think it was, their demonstration of dedication and commitment, their core values that helped us move forward, generational commitment, team commitment, all of us together moving forward. And there have been a lot of challenges along the way, but we always knew somehow, some way we would get through it. And I think that all came from Jack and Ruth's wonderful intention. We can make this work. During the 70s, there were many, many nurseries and garden centers in our valley, the Livermore Valley, the San Ramon Valley. I'd say at least a dozen. And a lot of those garden centers and nurseries went away during the drought of the 70s. It was a long drought, it was 7 years. I remember our wells actually started to pump sand. Our well started to pump sand, and at that point my dad said, we have to have a second well. And so we did ultimately dig a second well, or drill a second well. But I think the reason why we were able to sustain ourselves during those times is because we really knew how to deal with tough, interesting, hard times. I mean, our beginnings were not easy. It was a big challenge, and so this was just another challenge that you simply had to work through, that you had to find a way. How do we operate in a way that we can sustain ourselves? How do we manage to maintain and continue to move forward? So it's just a matter of adjusting, in being flexible. And I think that's another benefit of being a single store operation, is that you can be extremely agile. And that's what it took. It took agility, it took flexibility, it took creativity to kind of work through how could we help people garden during a drought. And that all came from Jack and Ruth's, my parents, our founders, lessons that we learned along the way. And I think it speaks to the fact that, we're now into our 6th decade and looking forward. Our mission statement I should share, which is, I think, really lovely, that we thought a lot about, was that the essence of Alden Lane is its natural beauty. Our commitment is to inspire our customers to take the beauty of Alden Lane home to their gardens. And it truly is a beautiful setting. The oaks are amazing. We have 4 generations of oaks here. For our 50th anniversary, we planted 24 more baby trees for an investment in the next 300 years or 400 years. So we're looking ahead, we're planning ahead. It was a very challenging beginning. It's a wonderful business because it's a very happy business. People come here because they want to. They don't come here because they have to. They come here to beautify their gardens. They come here to grow their own food. They come here to improve the environment. So it's a very, very happy business. And people often ask me when I'm going to retire, and I don't have any plans to retire. It is just a wonderful environment to live in and be in.